One of the hardest parts about deer hunting is just simply knowing where to put your stand. There are so many variables to deer movement, and all of your off-season scouting, your preseason scouting may have you think that where you're setting up is going to be a great place to hunt, and then the season rolls around and it becomes a deer desert. One of the absolute worst things is you put in your preseason scouting work, or you think you've put in all the work you need to. You've located some trails, you've found some oaks that are producing some acorns, and then the season rolls around, nothing ever comes by. So what makes a good hunting spot? What things should you be looking for in your stand locations? Well, in this video, we're going to go over 3 tips to help you make sure you're putting your stands or your blinds or whatever in the right place. And these tips will work on the supposedly shooting deer in a barrel private grounds and the overcrowded public grounds. But before we go over the things you need to look for in a good hunting location, do me a favor, and if this is your first time on my channel, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you click that bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload a video. And the first thing that you need to look for in your hunting spot are natural funnels. Natural funnels, or pinch points, or whatever you want to call them, are places in the habitat or the terrain that force deer movement through a specific point. Now, I know I said natural funnels, but I'm going to include any kind of funnels in this tip. I mean, it could be anything like the dam on a pond or the opening in a fence. It could be a bench along a steep ridge. It could be a finger of timber that juts out into ag fields. There are so many different ways that deer could be funneled down into specific travel corridors that it's kind of hard to name them all, but you need to know what they are and how to identify them on a map if you want to be consistently successful deer hunting. So start by looking at a topographical and an aerial map. On those topo maps, you're looking for changes in terrain that are going to funnel deer movement, like a bench or a saddle, points, especially a convergence of different points, because that's going to funnel deer movement up from many different trails up into one spot. Now, I know I said you can look for benches on topographical maps, and sometimes they will show up, but in most cases, they're going to be so small that you're not going to be able to see them. It's just going to look like one continuous hillside. So in these areas, especially when you hunt, like in the Ozarks or any place where there's a lot of gentle hills, you just have to get out there and scout to identify these benches. So after you've looked at and studied your topographical map, you need to combine that information with a satellite or aerial photo. That way you can see the changes in habitat types. One of the best areas is to look for an area where maybe you got a big patch of cedars right next to open hardwoods, or maybe part of a property was logged and right next to it is part of the property that wasn't. So you've got thick, brushy, probably bedding type habitat next to more open hardwoods. Those are going to be great transition areas where deer are going to be crossing through all the time. Also, you're looking for inside corners in ag country, or maybe brushy ridges and points that jut out into those ag fields. Also, look at those overgrown drainage ditches, because deer often use that to get from one side of a field to another, or maybe they'll bed up in there, and they are often overlooked. I like to try to find areas that have multiple features together to hunt over. So maybe I've got, an area where part of it's been logged right next to more mature open hardwoods, and then there's a bench that runs between them. That kind of multiplies your chances of seeing more deer activity, especially if you can situate these things between bedding and food. And the second tip to finding great places to hunt is you need to go to the places that nobody else wants to go. I know it's obvious you got to go where no other hunters are to tag big deer, but it's kind of more nuanced than that. And I hate using the word nuanced, but hear me out. So many hunters will go to the parking lot or go to the main parking area if you're on private land that's leased or shared by many other hunters. They'll go 100 or 200 yards down the main trails, and then they just kind of disperse out into wherever they think is a good spot to hunt. Even the hunters that try to go farther than anybody else will probably won't go up really steep ridges or cross a creek that requires more than just your standard rubber boots. So to consistently tag deer in especially pressured areas, you've got to look for these areas that other hunters just aren't willing to go to. They just don't have the energy, the drive, the cardio to go up that steep ridge. They don't want to pack in waders, or maybe they just don't want to go ask the neighbors if they could access the property through theirs. Some hunters say, or some property owners say no, but there's a lot of times they just say yes. So like I said, look for these areas that other hunters don't want to go, those swampy marshes that are pretty hard to trudge through, that creek that you got to go get chest deep waders to wade across. And also look for places that are often overlooked. That's right next to the parking lot and right next to major roadways. So if you want to shoot the biggest bucks around, or maybe just shoot more deer consistently, you have to do what the other hunters aren't doing. So get that set of waders to cross that waist deep water. Find that high ground in the middle of that marsh or that swamp. Hunt near the parking lots and the major roadways, and you will see how overlooked these places are. And the third way to find a good spot to hunt is to combine these habitat features we've been talking about with fresh sign. Finding fresh sign along these pinch points and habitat features we've been talking about means you need to be set up over these areas somewhere. And this is especially true if you're finding fresh scrapes. Rubs are a great sign. It means that a buck has been using the area at some point, and you can kind of narrow down the general time frame based on how that rub looks. But rubs don't seem to be as predictable as scrapes when it comes to seeing that target buck during your hunt. A fresh scrape, regardless of size, usually means that a buck is consistently using the area. It means that he's setting up a spot where he's going to come back and check to see if does have come into estrus, or maybe how far off they are from getting into estrus. A rub can be just a one-off thing, where a scrape, the intent is usually to revisit it. If you find a fresh scrape, not a scrape that's starting to get covered over by leaves, or maybe it's got dry dirt. It's got to be open and it's got to be moist dirt. And it's got to have that licking branch overhead. That's probably the most important part, is that torn up licking branch. Find that and then start moving toward thicker habitat. You might even find some more scrapes along the way, but if you keep going, you might find where that deer is probably bedding. But don't push it too far unless it is getting close to the end of the season, or maybe you've got a short window to make this happen. And so that was 3 tips to finding and setting up on a good spot. If you've got any more tips that kind of help you hone in on some consistently good hunting spots, leave those down in the comments below. Hit that like button if you like this video, share it if you found it helpful, and make sure that you are subscribed so you can stay informed.